Right, but they water the roses, then...
He took me into the house and lectured me for 2 hours on the importance of time, especially for one who proposed devoting his life to the art.
Queen Mary have a gigantic one. You could, I think.
How big?
You could drive something into it.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. Sure. Or NPL have some gigantic ones as well.
Where's NPL?
National Physics Laboratory, is it out in Teddington?
So I said, well, I enjoyed the music, but I didn't quite agree with that program note about there being too much pain in the world. The next afternoon, while he was shaving, I read out loud.
Digital phosphoroscope, I'm not entirely sure. They're broad function generators, voltage generators, signal generators.
I see.
Yes.
It's a bit incongruous. Do I need this today?
Well, that's a brilliant watering can for the job.
You probably know the one about the 2 monks, but I'll tell it anyway. Just empty by means of a gasoline engine. It left bubbles.
Yep, definitely no echo.
Benedict. In the woods, fields, and waste places. Anyway, in that silent room, I heard 2 sounds, one high and one low. I asked the engineer in charge why, if the room was so silent, I had heard two sounds. Now that everything is so easy, there's so much to do. Then you went back. After all, nature is better.
With this in the background, which did look quite impressive actually.
Yay!
Jimi Hendrix,
Yeah.
Captain Beefheart and his Magic Band, and various other names that escape me at the moment. And also all kinds of ideas that I've developed myself.
Passed by quantities of our favourite mushrooms, making not the slightest attempt to pick them. As we drove off, the woman was yelling, "Get out." She screamed, "Get out, and never come back." The first monk replied, "Put her down." I did, 2 hours ago.
Just the radicalness of making music that really makes people go like, what is this? And then that, from the natural progression from that was to people like, for me it was people like Steve Reich and Terry Riley and all the minimalists.
Terry
and,
Riley.
This is
We used to
really
sit
interesting
to that, didn't we, in the
hearing you
70s,
say this, because
70s.
Really?
that's exactly, yeah.
Yeah,
But of course, the psychedelic side of things, I was actually there.
yeah, I know,
and,
man.
and
That must
saw
have been nuts.
saw
I
people
can't
like
begin
Jimi
to
Hendrix
imagine.
and
Sure,
really
Jimi
early
Hendrix,
Pink
wow.
Floyd. Yeah.
Wow.
Journey from the Death of a Friend. I remember that one. We used to sing this.
Oh my goodness.
George Mantor had an iris garden. which he improved each year by throwing out the commoner varieties. One day, his attention was called. After hearing a few recordings, one of the directors said to me, "Wait a minute." Then 7 directors formed what looked like a football huddle. One of them finally emerged, came over to the garden, it turned out, belonged to the man who collected his garbage.
I went to a concert upstairs in Town Hall. The composer whose works were being performed had provided program notes. One of these notes was to the effect that there is too much pain in the world. After the concert, I was walking along with the composer, and he was telling me how the performances had not been quite up to snuff. So I said, "Well, I enjoyed the music, but I didn't agree with that program note about there being too much pain in the world." He said, "What? Don't you think there's enough?" I said, "I think there's just the right amount." George Mantor had an iris garden, which he improved each year by throwing out the commoner varieties. One day, his attention was called to another very fine iris garden. Jealously, he made some inquiries. The garden, it turned out, belonged to the man who collected his garbage. A very dirty composer. Was attempting to explain to a friend how dirty a person was whom he had recently met. He said, "He has dirt between his fingers the way you and I have between our toes." Schoenberg always complained that his American pupils didn't do enough work. There was one girl in the class, in particular, who, it is true, did almost no work at all. He asked her one day why she didn't accomplish more. She said, "I don't have any time." He said, "How many hours are there in the day?" She said, 24. He said, "Nonsense. There are as many hours in a day as you put into it. When I told David Tudor that this talk on music was nothing but a series of stories, he said, "Don't fail to put in some benedictions." I said, "What in heaven's name do you mean by benedictions?" "Blessings," he said. "What blessings?" I said. "God bless you, everyone?" "Yes," he said. "Like they say in the sutras, this is not idle talk, but the highest of truths." On another occasion, Schoenberg asked a girl in his class
I've been collecting old records
to go to the piano and play the first movement of a Beethoven sonata, which was afterwards to be analysed. She said, "It is too difficult. I can't play it." Schoenberg said, "You're a pianist, aren't you?" She said, "Yes." He said, "Then go to the piano." She did. She had no sooner begun playing than he stopped her to say that she was not playing at the proper tempo. She said that if she played at the proper tempo, she would make mistakes. He said, "Play at the proper tempo and do not make mistakes." She began again. And he stopped her immediately to say that she was making mistakes. She then burst into tears and between sobs explained that she had gone to the dentist earlier that day and that she had a tooth pulled out. He said, "Do you have to have a tooth pulled out in order to make mistakes?" His business of working with sounds, that we have no ears to hear the music, the spores shot off from basidia make obliges us to busy ourselves microphonically. During a counterpoint class at UCLA, Schoenberg sent everybody to the blackboard. We were to solve a particular problem he had given, and to turn around when finished, so that he could check on the correctness of the solution. I did as directed. He said, "That's good. Now, find another solution." I did. He said, "Another." Again, I found one. Again, he said, "Another." And so on. Finally, I said, "There are no more solutions." He said, "What is the principle underlying all of the solutions?" One day, I asked Schoenberg what he thought about the international situation. He said, "The important thing to do is to develop foreign trade." One day, when I was visiting across the hall, Sonia Sekula. I noticed she was painting left-handed. I said, Sonia, aren't you right-handed? She said, yes, but I might lose the use of my right hand. And so, I'm practicing using my left. I laughed and said, what if you lose the use of both hands? She was busy painting and didn't bother to reply. Next day, when I visited her, she was sitting on the floor, painting with difficulty, for she was holding the brush between 2 toes of her left foot. I enrolled in a class in mushroom identification. The teacher was a PhD and the editor of a publication on mycology. One day he picked up a mushroom, gave a good deal of information about it, mainly historical, and finally named the plant as Pluteus cervinus, edible. I was certain that the plant was not Pluteus cervinus. Due to the attachment of its gills to the stem, it seemed to me to be an entoloma, and therefore possibly seriously poisonous. I thought, what shall I do? Point out the teacher's error? Or following school etiquette, say nothing? Let other members of the class possibly poison themselves? I decided to speak. I said, I doubt whether that mushroom is Pluteus cervinus. I think it's an entoloma. The teacher said, well, we'll key it out. That was done, and it turned out I was right. The plant was Entoloma grayanum, a poisonous mushroom. The teacher came over to me and said, if you know so much about mushrooms, why did you take this class? I said, I take this class because there's so much about mushrooms I don't know. Then I said, by the way, how is it that you didn't recognize that plant? He said, well, I specialize in a jelly fungi. I just give the fleshy fungi a whirl. Thank you.